Everyone, it's Carl with Tabletop Tango. Everyone, it's Carl, and my current campaign is starting to ramp down. So now I got to figure out something new to do, and what am my thought process going to go around to make that happen?
It's a savage world, strange as a wind war. It's a savage world, classics to explore.
Everyone, it's Carl with Tabletop Tango, and look at the bubbles down there, do all the stuff. And so let's get right into it, though. So my current campaign is this emerging gods learning their powers in a cyberpunk world, and there's multiple factions. It's complicated. You know, we want to explore whether they're going to join one of the factions, whether they're going to go on their own, whether they're going to take over the world. There's just all sorts of stuff to explore. And that's generally what I do. I do homebrew because I don't know, just something that I've always gravitated towards. And I think that's one of the things I got to think about in my next campaign. Do I have a story to tell? And that's something you should always think about. Is there, and maybe it's not a, step-by-step, in the Savage Worlds, we talk about plot point campaigns kind of thing. Maybe it's a general idea that you want to explore. And I talked about that in previous videos when I was creating this new Gods with Power and what I went into thinking about it and the kinds of ideas. So that's the question. Do I have a story to tell? Previous campaigns always did. And I feel like I don't. I did a game where it was super post-apocalypse, where the world is kind of growing and they were sort of Victorian. And I wanted to explore what happened in that digital dark age. All knowledge sort of gets lost because it was all on computers. And so that was really a cool idea. And I didn't have all the adventures laid out, but I had this concept that I wanted to explore. So it had kind of that steampunk-ish, but there's going to be super technology that the players are going to discover and they're going to have to learn about. And ultimately they save, a city of the ancients. And that's a big deal. So I had stories, had ideas, and I don't now. So at least not off the top of my head. So I'm thinking about actually going after a Savage Worlds setting and picking that. And I know there's so many, and that's really what's cool about Savage Worlds. And I've looked at quite a few. And so I'm going, what's easy to do that helps me minimize my prep and the things I need to do, because this last campaign was super complicated. There was so much to keep track of with all these different factions and everything going on. So I was thinking about that. Let's do a setting. So what's the first choice is obviously fantasy. Fantasy, I think I did a video on it. Fantasy seems to be easier. Tons of tropes, lots of resources. I can find maps all over the place to drop in my virtual tabletop. It's easier, I think, from a good guy, bad guy. I can pick monsters and just go against the monsters. Necromancers are evil, crazy wizards are crazy, and all that kind of stuff, and we can go that. So that's the easy one. And with Savage Pathfinder, now I've really got a good basis to go from. Some of the other things that I'm looking at, and these would be kind of interesting, not looking at cyberpunk because I've done it to death. I used Interface 0 for a bit. I did my own homebrew thing with this Gods where we took the Superpower Companion and we ripped it apart because there wasn't a Superpower Companion update yet. Well, guess what? There is one now. So should I go after raw superheroes? I don't feel like that's not what I'm vibing at, because we just got done with something that's kind of that. There's some pretty cool stuff out there. Dead End for zombies, Wise Guys if I want to do something more, mafia kind of thing. There's something that's little kind of off the beaten path, kind of really, it's sort of fantasy, but it's got a cool vibe, and that's Crystal Hearts. And then obviously we have the Deadlands. So I'm offering up to my players, I think for myself, I want a setting that has a lot of rich history, but not too rich, because that's something you should look at when you're looking at settings. Does the setting give you enough room to explore and do things? Like, for example, I've been looking at The After, which is a pretty good setting as far as, at least I thought out with edges and how things work. But once you get into the Atlas and sort of the world, man, they've really fleshed it out to a point where I'm having a hard time kind of building my story in that world. At least I think I'm going to. So that's something to think about. So first, do you have an idea? And now what's going to be more straightforward and what has room for me to explore? Because again, this campaign setting becomes the concept, which is sort of where I'm coming in normally. I come in with a concept and I start building on that. And I don't want to just pick something and say, oh, I'll just run the plot point campaign. It'll be fine. It's good. I want something that's got a lot of room. So then you got Deadlands. Don't think my players are big on cowboys, but one of the things I'm gravitating towards, because it's a really excellent, I think, setting, put together really well. It lives in the Deadlands world universe, and so some of the cool stuff with Ghost Rock and some of those ideas that I think the players would enjoy exploring, that's Deadlands Lost Colony. So I put it up to a vote, and I talked about in a previous video long ago, working with the players, having a conversation as to what they would be enjoying, what they might not enjoy. That's where Deadlands, Old West, thrown right out the window, because that is not something that most of my players would enjoy. So what did we put up? We put up Deadlands Lost Colony. It's got that Firefly vibe, but it's not Firefly. I think there's a lot of room to explore in there. That'd be pretty cool. Looked at, I kind of also asked about something called Monster Hunters Club, which I actually did a review on, and that's a great setting. It would be a short-term campaign, though. I don't think there's a ton to explore there. It's really more of a monster of the week kind of thing. And maybe there's, like in Stranger Things, like for example, in Stranger Things, there's a little more of an arc, Dark World's coming, you can almost think about that ETU vibe where, there's supernatural and there's an arc there. So that's one of the things I offered up as well. And of course, I offered up fantasy, because I think fantasy is going to be easiest for me to run, be honest. And so that would be where we would bring in Pathfinder for Savage Worlds. There's a lot of Pathfinder knowledge out there. I would ignore all of it, because I think, again, once you get too much lore, kind of like that D&D Forgotten Realms, you lose space to really expand and do your own thing. One of the things I thought about with Pathfinder is maybe doing Dragonlance, which I did a video on, or a live stream on, how do I start converting it, because I wanted to convert for some of my convention games. So maybe that would be cool. But again, Dragonlance, that world's been told to death. I'd have to do it in another box set, another world continent called Taladus, which is where I put some of my convention games. I'd have to kind of break it apart, and I'd have to put it in a spot where the world of the Lance doesn't impact. So that's a tough one. Great for con games, maybe not great for a campaign. So we've got fantasy, think it's going to be easier. We've got Deadlands, Lost Colony, pretty rich. Pinnacle puts together awesome settings. They really think about what's it mean to have new edges and hindrances and the arcane backgrounds and how all that works together. So that's one that we're leaning towards. Can we throw a superpower companion out there? Maybe not. So I'm kind of rambling, I'll agree. But it's just the thoughts. What thoughts do you put into choosing? I think a lot of folks just, here's the new hotness setting, and I want to go after that one. But you really got to think about, are you going to tell a story? Do you have a story? Does the setting give you room to add your own flavor to it? Yet having richness where maybe you can do more of that rules as written from the setting standpoint. Don't have to invent new edges. You don't have to invent new hindrances. You got really a good piece put together there. And that's our Gods game I just got done. We wrote a whole document on new rules and how to superpower companion changes, and we added new edges. And none of the players ever used the edges because it wasn't in the main book, and that's where they would look, and don't want to do that. So prep. Story room. Good set so that I can just hand to the players and they can understand the setting. They can have cool things like hindrances and edges and all that kind of stuff and just feed it together. So where am I leaning? I think I talked a lot about Lost Colony because it'd be kind of cool to do a science fiction, but not so science fiction. I play Traveler, and that again becomes more episodic. Go to a planet, do a thing, travel to other planets. This would be more, it's the future, but it's a future that's constrained, and constraints add to creativity, I think. If you're working within a concept and you need it to be consistent or work within the world, that makes you think, and it helps the players get immersed. You're not sort of breaking the rules. And I think that's D&D is one of those things. Oh, I'm not going to harp on D&D. I don't need to. D&D is perfectly fine. But D&D, there's always that because of magic in the fantasy. You know, you want a floating citadel, it's because of magic. But guess what? The players can never get to that magic because they're players. Even at the highest levels, that stuff doesn't exist unless you're going to homebrew or do something like that. So I want something that's kind of consistent, more modern flair. So I think that's where I'm leaning, and that's why I'm making these decisions and why I'm putting in that kind of thought. And I think you should, when you're deciding what the new setting you want to work on or go through, is not just pick the latest Kickstarter. Really look at the edges, really look at the hindrances, really look at the setting rules. How do they all tie together? Read the setting. And if it reads like a novel, probably tough to fit yourself in there. But honestly, there's a lot of great settings, and there's quite a few you can't go wrong with. Red Wise Guys, it looks great. The After is pretty good, but again, doesn't have a lot of room. Obviously, Monster Hunter Club, we did a review on. We loved it. So there's many things there. Interface 0 3.0, a little too heavyweight, unless you really want to get down into the details. I used Interface 02 for a campaign, was wonderful. So all that put together, I hope the vote goes to Deadlands Lost Colony, and we'll see. So take all that grain of salt, think about what you're doing with your settings and why you're picking it. Or don't pick it at all because you got a cool story to tell in your own world and you're going to homebrew it like I normally do. But that's tiring. I need a break. So let's go with the setting. Let's go with Deadlands Lost Colony. Let's make it happen, and I'll tell you more about it as it goes. Thanks much for watching, and we'll catch you later. This is Tabletop Tango, and look at the bubbles, do the things, and we'll catch you later.
It's a savage world. Strangers are with